Cindy, I don't like it there. I don't like my back there, Bob. I don't like it.
I'll take the stabbing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially if they're gonna talk.
He wasn't a young guy then.
I think we should.
All right, this meeting will come to order. Decatur Township Board. Our invitation will be given by Pastor Tim Lindsay. Stand bow your heads.
Lord, we love you. I thank you for the privileges to serve. Thank you for our board. Thank you for our crews. Lord, thank you for our trustee. Thank you for the privilege it is to serve Decatur Township. And Lord, I thank you that what you do tonight, Lord, gives wisdom and strength. Lord, again, appreciate those who are willing to make these difficult choices. And thank you for the privilege that it is. Lord, we do think of this group, especially the Floyd family, and thank Chief Turner, that you especially good to him in his life, Lord. But thank you for the grace that you give us. Thank you for wisdom. I pray you would bless our meeting. Honor your name. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. You join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So the minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no corrections, the meetings are approved as distributed. The agenda has also been distributed to all members. Are there any modifications or additions? Hearing no objection, the agenda is adopted as presented. Were there any taxpayer comments to this?
No, and I think most folks are here on an invited advisory committee anyway.
Yeah,
So
gotcha.
I think I'd suggest leeway or whatever description as we go through the meeting.
Okay, we have old business resolution 2025-03 amendment to the township's 2025 township assistance guidelines. I'd recommend we just table that until the next meeting. If that works.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Our new and only business tonight is the review of the needs assessment, history, progress, and next steps of the Decatur Township Government Center and Fire Department Station 71 Capital Improvement Project. I'll just hand it to you, Mr. Trustee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Briefly, real quick, I'd like to introduce a few folks in the room. One, Adam Collins, as you may, a couple of you knew on the board, but the three of the others, maybe recall, we contracted with Adam about a year ago to serve as our attorney on the project. He'd been on board at that time, and then as you also recall, about August last year, we extended and eventually worked out the agreement with Envoy Company, and several of their staff are here tonight to help with the presentation and answer questions to serve as our owner's representative for the proposed project. Additionally, I'd like to introduce and re-express my appreciation to them, and I'll speak a little more to it in a moment. But about 4.5 years ago, when this came about, when I came into office, one of the first things I did was invite several members of the community that I call our stakeholders, knowledgeable of the township, knowledgeable of the department, and that type of thing, serve on this community advisory committee to confirm what I and the chief at the time thought as far as the necessities of having this building in place. That was representing the fire department was our battalion chief Key, Dr. Pat Andrews, Mr. Chip Pearson, Mr. Dale Henson, and Dale, as you may recall, is the retired chief of the department. and was chief actually when the building here was constructed. So he's probably got as much or more in institutional knowledge of anything about the building and that type of thing, and the difficulty we've had with it since that time. And also Dale is on the school board, as you know, and the school board has been very generous in their offering to allow us to construct on the lands adjacent to the south of us. So if I may at that time, kind of just by way of introduction, as I hinted, I came into office in 2020. Was approached shortly thereafter by the chief at that time, Chief Arns, with the desire to look at this building, look at replacing the building. We reviewed several things about it, looked deeper into and the gallows and those types of things. And I ultimately agreed with him there was the need. The building was originally constructed for 3 entities. Even though they were governmentally, they wanted to be separate from each other from my recollection of the history. It was built for the fire station and supporting elements to the fire station were built for a volunteer department, not a full-time 24-hour a day, 25-hour a day, more seems 360 plus day a year. Mechanism for operating the building. We've gone from, and again, not to lay something unexpected in his lap, but the Chief Henson can probably elaborate to you the number of runs back at that time to now we're in excess of easily over 8,000 a year. And all that it takes to support that with staff, with vehicles, with again, sleeping arrangements. We're entering an era of have entered an era where we have to be sensitive to people's preferences of living styles and those types of things. And the building just frankly doesn't accommodate that and hasn't for quite some time. Matters have been retrofitted and rehabbed and those types of things. We've had many, as I call, mechanical issues. There's a haunting story of a water leak on someone's desk at one point in time, and I mean the exit flow of water. And that type of thing. So again, those things came about. We brought in the folks on the community committee. They looked at things. We had several months of meetings, had several presentations. They agreed, and they're here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they 100% agreed that the need was there to do it. We presented to them as well the process of the POT, the build, operate, transfer delivery method, and our attorney and envoy can get into the deeper details about that a little bit. But I think they agreed that was the route best for the community to pursue in getting this building eventually replaced. Fast forwarding to again a year or better ago, I consulted with Adam and he agreed to come on board to serve us. Adam has a background in both sides of the aisle, having worked in the mayor's office with the city and now in the private sector with public-private partnerships, which is what this would end up being. Again, we vetted last fall with basically several companies. We extended and selected. The previous board agreed for the resolution to extend an offer and work out the details with Envoy to serve as our owner's representative, which kind of brings us up to where we are today. While I have the floor for just a moment, Mr. President, I'd like to editorial a few comments. Again, I've been working on this since I came into office in 2020. This isn't to brag, this isn't to complain, but just to state facts. I put a lot of effort into this. I've made a lot of intentional efforts to make sure this was everything done above board in the review of all our folks that we will have and suggested to the board and the township hire with as far as our contractors to this point and going forward. I've attended countless meetings with anyone that was interested in the project. Spent a lot of time doing that. Spent a lot of time at breakfast meetings, lunch meetings, meetings which I can't recall a meeting where, when those occurred, I didn't pay for myself because I've been in sales and I know when a sales rep buys you lunch, there's an expectation. So editorial comment in that regard, again, I tried to make sure that everything has been in the eyes and the concept of what is in the best interest for the people of Decatur Township. And so at that point, if someone has more questions for me or anyone from the committee may want to chime in now, but I know Envoy has presented or prepared a presentation that I think may hopefully explain some things or may answer some questions that you folks may have had or may generate some others. I may ask them to take the floor at this time, but I'd certainly like to offer or request for the opportunity of those that serve for the Citizen Committee and others have their 2 cents worth at some point through the course of the meeting as well.
Well, thanks for having this meeting and thanks everybody for being here. I think the intention was, because Cindy and I were on the board when all this was beginning and we voted on some action. But we have 3 new board members, Greg Hibbler, Anthony Parks, and Jared Bond, who were sworn in January. So there's a lot coming up with this project, a lot of votes coming up, and I thought this would be a great meeting to bring them up to speed on why we needed the building and where we're at, where we're going, and the financial expectations going forward as well. So,
Mr. President, I got one quick question before we started here. Yes. Just for the record, as you folks recall, we talked about July 1 as a legal date in which our board meetings will have to be streamed and recorded. Ms. Aubrey, our PIO, is here tonight doing that. I wanted to get a trial meeting or 2 on before it became law that we had to do it. So just for the record, this is being recorded and streamed. The meeting is tonight. Cool. Sorry,
all right.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm James Mercedes. You all can call me Blend, Coffee Blend. That's my name. How you write it? Can I spell it?
Did you need to get over here?
No. All right. You know, all good with you? Yeah. So I'm gonna walk you through what happened. Jason told us where we stand now. I'm gonna inform you steps, what's BOT, why BOT is better, what helps, and then all the process we've been through to this point, and then what's gonna happen on the next steps. So bill over transfer, as known as BOT, is a public-private project. So it's Delaware method, which developer design, build, finances, operates, or maintains a public project. Public-private agreement, known as PPA, is used to contract with the developer to design, construct, operate, and possibly finance a public project. The developer assumes all risks related to design, development, and construction. The use of this project development method is authorized by IC 5.23 of Indiana. And this is the contract structure that township, us as OTR and developer that we will award on the 20th. It's constructed, so it's the structure is like the owner of the township between the owner and developer. It's OTR, which is represented by Envoy, and the developer has subcontractors, construction and design team under them. So they're all going to be managed by the developer, and then between township and the developer, we're going to be in the middle to keep that process smooth as possible for the township.
And Glenn, can I jump in on a couple of things as you're going through? Just one of the benefits here that we've looked at, especially from a municipal side, is, I think the non-politically correct way to say it was like one throat to choke. Now that maybe they say one person to hug, but rather than having to go have this issue where you have a designer, a contractor, and you have to, the municipality where the owner would oftentimes have to arbitrate disputes between the two. It's have the ability to just go say, no, there's one person, you're responsible, you're going to fix this issue at your cost and deliver us the project you told us was going to give. So that's the structure here, is really getting at. You look at those subcontractors, the construction folks, the design team, those are relationships that are now off the township's plate and are really going to be handled solely by the developer contractor.
Any questions? we move on. So we're gonna talk about the risk transfer, cost reduction, GMP, and the process, what happens before. Now we move on. The risk transfer is a bill. It's basically a table where it tells you a traditional project, how it went, and now how the DOT works. So you can go through each of it and then you see the risk type, how it's shared, who gets it, and who's responsible for each of it.
And so the goal on these is just to find a way to transfer as much risk to the private sector as possible. They have the experience, they know how to handle it, trying to find a way to make them responsible for dealing. I mean, we're in an environment right now that's extremely volatile, has been for a number of years now. Construction pricing, tariffs, a lot of those other things, to the extent that we can kick that risk off to a third party who deals with it every day, that's deemed to be the reason why people go this route.
Next one is what you talked about, cost reduction and certainty. And so the developer will provide the township with a guaranteed maximum price, also known as GMP. We talk the next page about how GMP gets like all the process to the end. So we finalize that, and when they present, DOT definitely allows the developer to design team, design the project to the township needs and the exact budget that usually the township has a budget, they give it and they design to that price. So then we know all the exact costs at the end of the project. Or usually if we don't know the budget, we let them design something, we get what we want. So usually the township or whoever it is selects a team and they're gonna give what they need. So the design team builds or project something towards those needs. I know that they got from the team. If the developer holds the design contracts, this eliminates the change orders that are not owner direct, which means that usually those changes, if the scope gaps happen between like your design, so those scope gaps gonna be directed or like changed during the time of the construction, that doesn't affect the GMP maximum price. If there'll be the otherwise, if the owner wants to change something after the GMP is approved, then that's a change of order that also impacts the price of GMP. So that mitigates that risk. Developers have a network usually of like basically huge network that are qualified and have the quality to do all the work. And also they're like normally they have more people that bid to it, so they can also have competition. So usually competition is good for usually cost. So that helps a lot on that term. So because some of those contractors cannot work with public directly, so they can also work with private, so that expands the company that can bid for them.
So the developer will be the general contractor, right? But you're not the developer,
We help the township to hire the developer.
And
That's what we do.
And their function will be a couple of different things. You always need to have somebody to keep them honest, right? So they'll go through, make sure that the design phase is done. It's met all the needs of what the township needs, but then also verify on the front end, what do we think this project should cost? Look at their budget, cut out the things that aren't needed. I think I can do a lot of that, but the honest answer is I can't. You really need somebody who knows and sees it every day, who can tell you, is this pricing right? Are they loading too much contingency cost, whatever else here? And so every project that gets done this method, we represent that, or we recommend that the city or the township have an owner's technical rep to do that. The contract will still be held with the developer solely by the township.
Yeah, and to that note, Envoy has an internal estimating team that has quite a bit of experience with it, so they'll take a deeper dive into the overall construction estimate and bid.
Are you managing anyone else but the developer?
No,
Are there any other aspects to the project that you manage? Or?
They're responsible for, once it gets turned over to them, once they go through the design process and they have a design to cost, we're turning them loose. And, it's kind of like holding a golf club. You got to have a really kind of light grip. The more you squeeze, the more they're going to want to turn costs back to you if something goes wrong. So we're trying to make sure that once they put together a design and a cost, they're responsible for delivering the project on time and on budget. And if they don't, that's when we'll step in and deal with it, and we'll make sure they're doing those things. But generally speaking, the job is to just, again, one party to really focus on, as opposed to, the multitude of different ones that you can have on a project of this size.
and all what Adam said and Miranda said. This is the GMP sheet where we go for the first step, which is conceptual design phase. So we, so on the rep, we're gonna be following all these phases one by one. The first one is where we define the scope, we do the project viability, and also at this phase, we still cannot tell any number for financing. We just know what's gonna happen, what we're gonna have to design. So then we move to the second, which is schematic design phase, or known as D. So we usually define all the major system, all spatial relationships on it. All of a sudden, we're gonna move on the third phase, which is BD, which most of the companies or developers can give us a price at this stage. But at this stage, if we get a price, the contingency is way higher. So we usually, as a owner rep, we usually fight for that to be set at the construction documents, which we exactly know what's gonna be built, what is projected, so then we are closer to not have that much scope gaps we talked earlier. So if you reduce all the scope gaps and we know exactly what we're gonna be able to build, then price or GMP will be way more accurate and the contingency gonna be way lower than if we set to DD. So usually the fourth step is where, as I said, we like to tell the developer to set the GMP. So they after they develop the GMP, they're gonna come finalize all that and they're gonna come for like present to all of you. And that's gonna be the last step if that's approved. And then moves from township like meeting, it approves and then moves to the developer so they can start and do all the agreement and buyouts, subcontract and all of that, so they can move finalization of the construction. At this point, I know all of you like to financing and all of that, but I do not have a number that I can give or assume. So it's too early in the phase, like you're in the very early phase.
Which phase are you on here?
We are at the first one.
The first
So
one.
yeah, that's
So-
gonna be basically. You have anything to say that?
No, so I think as you just look at it, we're just entering that initial space to say we have somebody, we have a, maybe a general idea of what the needs are, a very, very rough idea of maybe what funding could be available. How do we get somebody to take all that, put it together and develop what a project could look like? And so typically these are set apart in two different phases. One is, and you'll see this coming up, but scoping phase where they go through the design process, work with the chiefs, work with the trustee, get everything that needs to be done to design it, put a cost estimation together and put a GMP. And once you get that GMP, that's when it comes back to the township to say, this is the project, this is the price. Do you want to move forward? And if so, they take it the rest of the way and construct it.
So no builders, I mean, do you have RFQs out that
We're gonna move on to the next stage.
on the next page? Okay.
Yep, that's where I'm gonna walk you through where we definitely where we stand to this day.
And since I yell, I'm happy to kind of jump in here if you want. So statutory process, everybody has to follow to go through these. The very first part is that the unit of government has to pass an authorizing resolution. So that was what was done by, I think, the prior iteration of the township board back in, I said August 2023. I'm gonna have to change it. Seems like forever ago. Maybe
Well, yeah, that was done longer.
So, but we have that. So that was already done. That was a qualifying piece. The next thing that you have to go through is you have to issue a request for proposals and qualifications. And essentially, if you think about it, all public projects and expenditures of public money requires a policy that you bid, right? But that can be, depending upon, there's a spectrum which direction you go. You could have to bid everything down to, the individual components you buy or larger chunks. This has you bid the largest chunk, which is really who's going to design and construct the project, and in some cases equip. So the township issued an RFPQ, this request, and it was initially published on March 21st. You have to publish it twice. So in March, that was put together. The RFQ, what happens then once that happens, you have the opportunity for folks to provide proposals. One thing that is a little bit different here, just given the nature of this project, it's a little bit different with a combined facility. It had an informational day. So in April, proposed developers were allowed to come in, look at the project, talk to chiefs, talk to the trustees, see how the buildings work, and figure out, is this really something that they have the expertise and the ability to do? Once they did that, they were submitted the RFQ responses. I think they had to be in April 18th. Thank you. So when they submitted those, we ultimately got 5 responses. Build BW, Garmong, Hanig, Shielsex, and F.A. Wilhelm. So a really good spectrum of the market from the 2 largest contractors within the region down to much smaller, kind of specialized people with a lot of experience. As a result, we went through those and reviewed the proposals to determine who were compliant. There was one group that just wasn't even legally compliant, so they were out from the beginning. And then from there, we said we really look at the top 2 or 3 and who do we want to identify to interview and have a one-on-one conversation with. The top 2 developer submissions were both Garmong and Shield. We can go into this in a little bit, more detail at the next meeting as well. But looking at the previous 2, Hanig, good firm, probably just didn't have as much direct experience, not only doing this type of project, but public-private projects. And you kind of have to know how to work with a governmental unit in order to make this happen. It's a little bit of a different animal than what you would typically see. F.A. Wilhelm, huge construction firm, biggest in the state, do a tremendous job. But I think the general feeling across everybody was they slapped a really good marketing. You could tell they had the best marketing people, but hadn't really maybe thought about the individual project and what needed to happen here the most. Whereas the other 2 groups had put, much more time thinking about how would they approach your individual project. So as a result, brought in Garmong and Shielsex in for interviews. Both were done on April 24th. And so what we did through that was interview, talk to them a little bit about their proposal, where we thought there were gaps, let them explain some of the things that, they thought they would do that are maybe a little bit different than others. And then we took that information, we went and called the references. When everybody provides references, generally you're going to get their best reference. But at the same time, it can be interesting to see the differences that come out as a result of that. And I think we found a little bit of that here in terms of these as well. The other thing that's important to look at here on the front end is fee structure. So we know early on, what are they going to charge? If someone comes back and wants to charge you, a 10% design fee, well, that's probably not going to work for us, right? That's far in excess of what they were. So looking at the quality of the submissions, experience the folks had, how they were going to approach this individual projects, how they interviewed, what their references gave, and what their fee structure was. Ultimately, the committee came back and selected Garmong as its preferred group. So that's to answer your question about where we are today. That kind of covers everything to be done today. Everything that comes out of here is really going forward.
I was just curious because
Yeah.
this is all new to us tonight. I didn't
Yeah.
know any about this.
No,
and I don't know why. I don't know why we don't know before now. So,
But so hopefully,
That's not exactly approved. I mean, the board approved in August, which you didn't attend that meeting, the selection of Envoy. And the process going forward.
I got
on
you.
that.
I got you.
So-
Thanks, Trustee.
so everything before award the bot are things that happened prior to today. Everything down from there is really what would be going forward. One is the award. So what the statute requires is that once a selection is made, an evaluation, a recommendation is made. In our case, we put together an evaluation memo. Public notice is provided, and the proposals are available for public review. So those things have all been completed. The trustee has those all ready to go. The next thing to be asked is an award of the project at the township's next meeting on May 20th. Once that happens, that's just confirming the selection of Garmong in a public format. Once that's done, then we start with the contractual pieces, which are twofold. The first is the scoping process. We talked about it a little bit before. Township will essentially enter into a contract with them that has 2 pieces. One is they go through the planning, design, pre-construction, and cost estimation process. So that's where they're going to work the most with your team and staff here, develop what we need, see what it's going to cost, what'll fit on the site, and then most importantly, if we can only afford to buy Fords, we're not going to price Cadillacs, right? So we get a pretty good sense right on of where this is going to fit into budget and focus on, where we think this needs to be as opposed to things that just aren't realistic for everyone else. Once they go through that project, complete that design, they'll then establish what they call guaranteed maximum price, GMP. And that's essentially their all-in cost to do the project. And so at that point, that is, again, where we come back to the board to say, here's the number, here's where we think it's going to come in, here's what's included within it. And is this something that the township wants to go forward with? Alongside of that, and this is where Jeff Peters and the rest of the team kind of comes in, as we start to get a preliminary idea of what that cost will be, that's when they will start working alongside this process to kind of go through what the financing options are, what we have to go through to do that, and what kind of approvals are necessary there. Once we have those, those things kind of dovetailed, the GMP and the approvals on the financing. Next step is to close on that project financing. Typically, in most cases, it's either the issuance of a bond based on revenues, or sometimes folks have the capability, paying cash, maybe some combination of both. That's when, we'll get that all approved. And then from there, you begin the construction process. So the developer will then go start to construct the project. They'll get draws from the bond trustee, and it works a lot the same way that any commercial construction project does. So they'll have to submit applications for payment. They'll have to have all the backup invoices. These guys will review it, toss out, all the stuff that doesn't make sense. Make sure that you're really getting, the things you're paying for, the things that were actually done, and that it ties the percentage of the project that's been completed. At that point, they're usually going through as part of the owner's technical rep, doing inspections, making sure quality, all those things meet. If they told us they were going to put in a certain quality of material, that's what actually ends up getting put in as part of the process. That's in addition to whatever kind of inspection, in this case, the city will do as part of its regulatory permitting process, and the State Department of Homeland Security. Anyone else who has that kind of regulatory police power, they'll continue to do all that. That construction process goes, and then once it's done, the improvements, everything that's built get transferred to the county, and we start on the warranty period. Usually what's included in here too, they call it different things, commissioning, shakedown. Someone will come in, work with you, show everybody, like when you buy a house, you never know, at least I never know, where's the filter on the AC, right? Like I got to go find it. What size is it? I got to take it out to do it. So they'll go through all those things with you to make sure that your team, fire department, everybody knows how the building operates, what needs to be done, what needs to be maintained. And then once you get done with that, punch list, the whole thing, that's when the warranty period starts. And so that's usually where it is where they will come back. And if there's an issue, quality, equipment doesn't work, all those things, the developer has the obligation to come back and fix all those components. Usually that warranty, depending on the system, can be 2 years, can be
1 year, can be 2.
Yeah.
Like it depends, like all the.
And certain components are different. You still get manufacturer's warranty on whatever the roofing material is or whatever else, but this is just them coming back in to take care of essentially material defects.
But we do have enough time after that to see everything that's working or not working in that year or 2 years.
So that's the process. A lot done, but still quite a bit to do. Now, I like to think because the part I'm involved with is almost done. That's the hard part. But the reality is, like, that's not the case, right? Like, once you get this started, there's still a lot of work to do in terms of maintaining and managing to make sure that ultimately the developer is going to delivers what they promised they were going to do. And that's why you've got a really good kind of owner's rep team here to hold everybody accountable through that process.
Great. That's basically the end. If you have any questions from you, Adam, or our team, feel free.
Any questions?
Is there any kind of concept put together yet?
Not yet.
No.
Once we award, then
Then you start.
we have some notes from Chief Morrell, but we don't have anything put together because we have to award the company, so then we can start working something.
And I think part of it's what I said to earlier, going back to, you want to make sure you have the people in place, because I think the number one thing, we tend to see a lot is people come back with and they say, well, this is what, we designed because this is what you need. And it's great, but our budget's 20 million and it costs 45, right? So it's been, my experience, and I think these guys would agree, that having somebody who's looking at this from a cost perspective really early on helps you kind of look at it and say, what is most critical to the department? What is most critical to the trustee? What's most critical to the community? How do we make sure we get, the needs and really knock those out? And then we're able to layer in the wants as we have additional ability savings, funding there. But starting that sooner rather than later helps keeps everybody's expectations, I think, in check in terms of, where the project can go. You're not wasting 6 months to find out that it's something that's wholly unachievable from a budgetary standpoint.
Also, a couple things of note. When we went through the selection process, when we selected a developer, they put together their team that included the design team. So that went into looking at the teams of these developers that they put together and deciding which team was the strongest as well. So Gorman had put together a pretty strong team from a design standpoint and architectural standpoint. And also, when we went through those 4 stages of design, you really start with kind of like a cocktail napkin drawing. That's your concept, and then you work into like getting more detailed as you get to construction design. So you're basically going from a cocktail napkin sketch to blueprints ready to build. So that's where you build in those levels of design.
Yeah, and I think to that point and your point, that's really the time when you can look at the value engineering of cost and where you really save money as far as your guys' needs from an operational standpoint, but then from a cost standpoint to build. Those key stakeholders can add in their knowledge and expertise and their partnerships to really look at the design of the project that then helps impact that cost and that budgetary number.
And one other thing is always, and one more, especially with me, but these budgets always include contingency, both for the developer, but also typically for the owner, which I think we all recommend, too. And the goal here is to come set a number, and we're trying to like hit the intersection of what is the realistic cost. We don't want it to be too high, but hit that, really thread that needle. So once we set a number, not coming back to you for something else to ask for more unless it's something that everybody really wants, right? We looked and said like, hey, there's a real opportunity here. There's funding there. You can do more, as opposed to what has been, I think, some of the folks, at least in the room, experience on a public project where you come and set a number, the public hits it, and then we're coming back, every 2 to 3 months and saying, well, and there's this, and there's that, and there's this. Nobody likes that. And I can tell you that from my experience, the mayor's office, a quick way to get fired, is to come back and ask the elected officials every month, can we do more? Everybody just wants to know what it's going to cost, because you have that certainty, you can plan for it, and you can expect. And that is the goal here, is to give you a top line number that hits realistically what the project is going to cost, is not too high that it includes the things that you don't really need. But then when you come back, it's really the opportunity to say, here are the things that really are additive and make this better, and things we want to do, as opposed to the things we forgot or missed.
Mr. President, if I may, as the fire chief, it's very crucial to me to manage this budget accordingly and efficiently. So every day I'm looking at the budget, trying to figure out where we can save money and spend money, whatever it may be. The committee, or the work group, as I like to call it, that we have put together moving forward with Chief Key's supervision, they're looking at things from a high level, smart level, right? So it's simple, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's timely, and it's easy to come to, right? So we're not going to waste anybody's time or money when it comes to building this fire station. And I'm glad Chief Henson's here to kind of elaborate on the past of how that transition of finances and the development model has changed over the years. So the overall scope of how we're going to save money in this project, we're working on that every day. So the work group is working efficiently to make sure we have items that we need, not necessarily want.
And I think that's where we're at as a board, because in the end, we're asked to vote to spend money, right? That's why we're here. So with that comes, we'd like to know what we're spending the money on, right? So as I'm understanding this, the road we're on, we're just gonna have a grand total at one meeting to vote
Yeah,
on?
and it'll be a two-step. One will be, and I'm glad you asked this question. It's an important point I missed out. So once you have a selection, you enter into a contract. The first piece is we say, tell us what it will cost us to design and do the cost estimation. And so that's the minimum number that you've committed to. Once you get that, you're gonna have 100% construction drawings. You're gonna have a plan. If you decide not to move forward, you own it. So you can use it. If their number's too high, you don't like working on it, if you got to put it on pause and sit on the shelf for 2 or 3 years, you're able to do that, come back, rebid, and you don't have to go through that process again. That'll be the first number, which will be the much smaller number, right? Just by, because it's just a design cost estimation. So it tends to be a percentage of the overall. Once they're done with that, they will bring back one total number. And in this case, one of the benefits of this model too is, so you're going to have the design done at that point. So already you'll know what that number is. They're going to give you all the costs of the construction. They're also going to load all the costs, typically, unless, we haven't had this conversation, but if you want to do it a different way, all the equipping as well. So you're really getting a turnkey, you're not going to have to come back and find 6 office chairs. Like that's going to be loaded up into the budget, unless you want to set it aside elsewhere and go from that. So you really then get one piece at the beginning that you know what it's going to cost, and it's somebody else's responsibility to come in there and deliver that.
So what votes are coming up for us to spend money?
So next week will be the vote to approve.
To award the preferred developer. That one.
To award the developer.
Yeah, that's free, right?
Okay.
I guess there's no cost at that.
Well, I mean, that comes with a price tag though.
It
'cause
will.
We don't know what the other people quoted.
Yeah.
I mean, again, maybe that's where I'm going is that and having talked to other board members, not myself personally, but, I think it'd be better for us if we're along for the ride. Like here were the quotes. This is why, and maybe that's not in our authority, but it is going to come to a point where we vote. And if there's any question marks above our heads on how we got here.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. There's not really been any quotes to this point.
Okay.
Because again, there's been no scoping, there's been no price determination. The most substantial of any kind of thing in a dollar amount would be the respective fees that each of the developers presented to what they would take of the cut of the total cost of the project. And I would feel that you probably should have it in front of you that, at the end of the day, the specific numbers, hopefully you guys have it handy or I'll go get it. But at the end of the day, Garmong was better by probably about half compared to what Sex.
It was significantly, what they're giving us is a percentage.
Yeah.
7% versus 12%. Those are not exact, that's just going off memory. But
Total project.
So the whole project cost is $100. One entity said we'll take $7.
Yeah.
The other one again, without remembering that clear, said we'll do it at $12.
So the 5 million show sex and 10.
Yeah.
Well,
they'll design the project to your budget. That's the thing.
At this point, the only
Either of
numbers
them.
we have are fees, basically, because we have no fees based on the
But
fees.
that's,
We gotta get the best value from Claremont.
And one other piece that we'll do alongside that with the owner, I keep saying we, it's a royal we here. These guys will do is the owner's route. they will get an idea as we go through this phase what they think, because they do this, they build these for communities. So they'll get an idea of what that project will be. But the difference here is rather than going out and spending, so let's just use the number of 25 million for round numbers. And you say a developer fee is, or not developer fee, design fee is, 4%. That's $1 million, right? Is my math's right. You get $1 million there in a design fee. So in another process, you'd be taking that $1 million, then go throwing those out to 3 groups, asking them to go and kind of price that all. And they'll do that. The issue is you're not going to get any guarantee over, did they really create a design that fits your budget? Because architects generally can't price as well. They're not very, it's kind of like a tire. You can turn or you can accelerate. You can't do both. Architects are kind of the same. They can design. They don't always do a great job of pricing. So you'd lose out on that advantage in terms of having the benefit of somebody crunching down on the price from the very beginning. You'd also have the issue of if there's a disagreement, scope gaps, these things which always happen, which is you can't be designed this way or they miss something. Those are all going to fall on your table. So essentially what we're saying here is, you're gonna pay these guys a portion to design, but at the end they're going to give you a price before you decide to move forward with constructing the project. They're going to give you a price. It's one that they're going to commit to, and we're going to be able to shade it against what the owner's technical rep says. Given this number of square footage and current cost, this is what a building should cost.
Review the data, the previous project we did the same size of the fire station. There's like a whole database that we have and we can compare to.
That's what I was thinking as well. I was thinking
your point, you station. There's like a whole database that we have and we can compare to.
That's what I was thinking as well. I was thinking
your point, you said 20.
Fire stations
10
once all the
million.
time, yeah.
It's not going to be the difference of 25 to 10 million. The difference is going to be very tight. So that's difference. We go and see the fees. So let's say Garmon said 4%, she is at 7, so 3% and 25 million. It's huge gap at this point. So those are the numbers of like we look and then why we chose to go that route at this point. So we not ask them to give quotes, we not ask them to give numbers. So those numbers, if we ask them right now, they're gonna give us super high number that we don't want to even start. So the whole point of this is we chose a team that they can lead, like they can take the notes from your team, they can build something to that, and then we can go and decide if it's too high or too low. We come into that, we compare as we talk from our database and what's happening in the market, all the tariffs and stuff that has been going on. We do all those measurements and we come to conclude that this is high, or low, stuff like that.
Adam, you mentioned one of them maybe had a technical issue or a legal issue. Are you able to speak at that at all? Or?
So typically the first thing we do is just compliance.
Yeah.
Did they meet all the requirements? And we're looking at that for 2 reasons. One is kind of a simple kindergarten report card. Can you check all the boxes? If you can't check all the boxes in a response, probably not a good indication of where your attention to detail was there. So that's one half of it. The box they forgot to check in this particular one wasn't, the biographies of the individuals. It was a non-collusion affidavit, which we make everybody sign to say we affirm that we haven't colluded with any, folks involved in the process to try to win the work here, and a non-litigation affidavit that says we're not subject to any litigation to say that, that would keep us from completing this project. And so I'll say for me personally, those are 2 pretty big threshold issues. Like we had the discussion, I think ultimately if they don't provide them, that's not a great sign, right? And so you look at it and say they don't provide those, and then they are the most important to a certain extent, kind of part of the proposal. So whether they just forgot them, that's a bad one to forget and creates a really bad sign. So, we don't typically on a technical legal compliance kick somebody if they ordered the things wrong, or maybe they've incorporated one part into two. It's not that piece, but when they don't submit the non-collusion, no litigation affidavit, like that's a first for me. For what it's worth, we probably, done this, I don't know how many different times. I've never seen that happen where those are left.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board in August. Has a location been posted so far?
Yes.
Yeah.
And part of the developer duty will be to confirm. I think I mentioned, if I didn't, sorry, but the school has been very generous to offer us the land to the south that they own for us to build there. Ultimately, ideally, and the chiefs are here, and the past chief is here to tell you about the logistics of how you don't want to partially build a station, relocate equipment, and that sort of thing. But ultimately, ideally, then we could build, move, and then do all this.
Jim, comment, chief?
Well, kind of piggyback on what Chief Wood said about, why as fire chief we built 3 fire stations, and I was not a construction manager, and the board approved the dollar amount. When we had to make changes and all that, we come back and had to vote on it, and the spot is. It's not new, but it's relatively new over the last, I don't know, multiple
10,
years.
15, yeah.
But there are multiple fire stations and headquarters being built in our state. And I know that when I was director of the Indiana Fire Chiefs. And I think this is the best way for you guys to go, because if something goes wrong, it goes on these guys, the developer, but that's your job to make sure that happens. And so, and I will say, Kelly was part of a couple of buildings with me when I was chief. We looked at what do we need, what do we want, and we got some wants. But we tried to get everything we need. Tried to keep that number down, and I believe that they would do something. And this building, built in 1991, started in 1991. We moved in March of '92. We've had multiple issues while I was fire chief, and I'm sure they've had some of the same issues since I retired in 2014. And I believe everyone who works here, from the trustee's office to the fire headquarters to the firefighters, and they deserve a new facility. And being on the school board, I went to the superintendent at the time, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, if they want to build a new station, can we work something out to, transfer some ground?" And we did that with this building because I literally bought 2 acres on the corner here, our volunteer corporation, when I was the volunteer chief. And we went to build this building. The school said, "Whoa, we might want to upgrade this road out here." Okay. So they asked us, would we move this to the south? We'll give you a little more ground if you'll let us use this corner. And we did that. And so I think the school district and the township has worked well together. And I think you guys are headed in the right direction. They hired the right company to do that, because I'm always been all over the state. I've been in multiple buildings that they've been a part of, and they're excellent. So I just want to throw that out there.
So, has the school corporation voted at any time to say they're going to do that, or is this?
No, we have it in writing, sir.
Okay.
It's in writing. Signed by the superintendent.
I have just a question. I can't help it because of what I do. I mean, I'm a site contractor. Have you guys looked, with the utilities and everything? I mean, with the power lines? I mean, what kind of square footage? I mean, you guys, you have some sort of square footage in this new station figured. I mean, when,
We've done a test fit. Our real estate agents especially have looked at the aerials and measurements and like where like power lines run through, and they've done a test fit, and they believe that it will fit there. But that's part of what the through the scoping process, the developer is going to confirm that they can build the square footage
because
that's
that's,
needed.
this is Duke Energy, they're
Yeah.
really,
And one other piece too, actually as part of the RFP process, we asked them to provide a test fit as well to come back and look. So the two that came back and provided an interview had already kind of gone and looked based on assumptions we had given them and said, hey, as we look at this, the amount of space you're going to need, parking, all those other things, we think we can fit it on here. We might have to do some build selective demo, of this existing building, kind of move people back and forth. But that's been a question both the owner's rep and then the individual bidders have looked at, to the extent that they have enough information to get there, feel like it's possible to move forward.
And I've communicated with AES, who was actually power line holder. Obviously they weren't from plans and design plans, but they did indicate that there is a possibility and willingness to work with us. You can put ancillary things like parking and drives and those type of things under the power lines. You just can't put a permanent fixture under it. So
it just concerns me a little bit. I mean, it is for a fire station, which I don't mean this disrespectfully or anything, but I mean, we got ladder trucks and hose testing and things like that. It concerns me that, and just the overall infrastructure that's in this area with the school, with the amount of kids and foot traffic and stuff. That's one thing.
What about the drive into this neighborhood next to us? Is that going to be traffic? How do I want to say it? A lot of traffic with people going in and out of that entrance.
my take, if I'm understanding your question right, is traffic for the building wouldn't be any more than the traffic for this building now.
Okay.
Right? And so I don't think it would be that invasive on them or whatever, if that's your point.
Yeah, because I was wondering about the drive in the fire station.
Yeah, and the city will have to approve the driveway cut to High School Road. The other thing I would add, that leads to another point I did want to make, we will also have to rezone that site.
Yeah.
It has a school zoning, we'll have to put it to a general government building zoning. At that point, Adam is our specialized, as I just started attorney for this. Our township attorney actually is also a land use attorney. We used to work for the city as a land use planner. We would tell him to do it. So those things. So when we talk about some of the costs, there would be a little additional cost for the rezoning process separate from what we've been talking tonight. Is the one point I want to make. But B, in general, we have that. I don't say this to brag, but I've worked in the planning department of the city. I've served on the council of the city. I've served with the civic council and its land use committee for numbers of years. I at least have I think a good basic understanding of how to approach that in the rezoning and accommodate. One of the things as we go through the scoping is, I'll be at the table telling the developer, we've got to look at those protections to those neighbors over there, landscaping, and those types of things. So, again, that's the things in the details that will have to come into place as we go forward.
And I think it's a good thing to mention too. Those are things that you don't turn over to them. So those are things when I say get the site ready, get the zoning, those are things that they're going to expect the township to do, which is generally best for everybody because you make sure it gets done the right way. The other thing on the curb cut, Amway can correct me if I'm wrong, but the ones I think we saw all did show a discrete entrance off of High School Road into the space. So they essentially moved the entrance, if I'm looking at right here, the entrance you had right there, just flipped it onto that site in a similar fashion. So it wasn't running through a residential area or anything else. It was just
yeah, if that was your point, we won't go through the residential area.
No. I just wondered with being so close to the neighborhoods there.
I don't.
And now,
I just, high school roads is becoming it's so busy. It's just,
Greg, as far as, I'm sorry, but as far as the infrastructure here, as far as the response protocols and things like that, Chief Smith and I have a pretty good relationship. I work with school police if there's ever an issue. Each battalion chief, all three shifts, have a guide that basically, even though it's not a policy, it's a guideline, that we don't cut through the school on emergency runs, even if the run's at the front of the school. The quicker way is obviously going to be the back way through the admin building, so on and so forth. We'll go down high school in Kentucky. So I guess my point to that is we have a safety guideline that's in place to make sure that even if the infrastructure stays here, we do our due diligence to make sure that everyone's safe in the area. And that includes the people in Carson Park as well, making sure there's no crossover, walking across the street, things like that. So that's actually something that as of last year, we've included in our driver operator program, is to simulate incidents that could happen in this area. So we do have a pretty good response relationship with the school.
On a maybe different topic, but somewhat related to that, I see in Plainfield a lot, the fire trucks, as they get close, the stoplights change and everything. I don't know if you've ever thought about that.
Those are opticons.
Out at, is that what they're called? Yeah, out at high school in Kentucky, or maybe it's not an issue. Maybe when you get up there, there's enough. That's maybe a different discussion, but.
Well, we've had them before.
Those are very expensive to
Yeah.
maintain. We've had them before, and they're on several of the stoplights in the township.
Yeah.
But when they quit working, they don't know if DPW or who is supposed to repair them, because we've tried to contact. Yes, it's awful. And then they're so expensive to repair that they're like, yeah, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So they work for a while and they're great, and we have the lights on our fire trucks that make them work. But when they quit working on the stoplight itself, nobody wants to fix it. They don't want to pay to fix it, and it's on the city or DPW, or they don't know who it is. I was in the head of that project years ago when Chief Vincent was still here trying to fix them around here, and it never got done. But they're
the
great.
right person here for it.
Yeah, they're great. They're very helpful, and
Yeah.
they would be awesome for us, especially on Kentucky Avenue. They do struggle.
Well, that's all state highway, so
Yeah, so that was another problem. Who's in charge of that one?
And we actually checked into those last September, October, when Chief Burrell was fire chief. We had a meeting, he and I discussed that. And like Chief Key elaborated to, number one was cost. It was just, it was a lot, it was expensive more than what you would think, cost initiative-wise. And then number two, nobody really knew who serviced them. And you would think that we would have contacts for who would service. Nobody knew. So it was kind of like, call this person, call that person. And we just didn't have, I won't say it's a bad way, but we didn't have time to keep running in circles to try to fix that. So what we did in the meantime is we trained all of our apparatus engineers to use due regard and caution. Even if we have the green light, we come to a stop to look all ways. So those are modern day safety features that we've implemented while responding. So the opticoms are great. I support them. They're just expensive, and nobody knows who services them.
Or why they stopped working.
And I'll get shot if I will. So I don't want to.
We've already done. You guys already done. They did borings and stuff out here, right?
No
soils
borings.
yet?
So they've done, what we did was initial title survey phase 1.
Oh, okay.
And then
I thought you guys did.
because part of it was the challenge is, these guys know better than me, but I'm always like with borings, like you dig in the wrong place,
Well,
and it cannot be helpful.
I did the synthetic soccer
Okay.
field there. The soil's crap right now.
Okay.
The whole school ground bad. So and Dale being on, I had to go back. They had to go back to him and we had to cement stabilize it. So
I think once we get the better idea of the test fit and what's going to have to go where, go back through, bore it all, see, so we get a real idea of kind of what the soil conditions would be and what is appropriate there.
Go around
where the foundation is.
Yeah. Because I go poke a hole, it'll be in the wrong place, and I'll tell everybody it's great. So that's where we've got that preliminary done, but to come back and say, we've looked at the site, the survey, the title, getting through the phase 1. We think it all makes sense, but that's where getting those folks on too to say, finish that up and say, like, yeah, it looked okay to you guys. We're actually going to build here. Here's what else we need to do, test, and make sure we have it right. And that's helpful to know too, that we know we have some soil issue on there because we can get them to focus on that.
Ed Andrews and Chip Pearson, you were on the steering committee for the.
Yep.
Did you have any comments for the new board members? What your input was?
Oh, well, a lot of it was learning what was going on and coming to our own conclusions. We were talking about bots versus there's some other acronym as well, deciding that sort of thing. But I have to take it, for me, it was the person, the building, like 1991. If you think about all the things that have changed in your life since 1991, it's a lot. There's technology, et cetera, but there's only so much you can do to take a new thing and fit it into an old space. And you do what you can do, you know. But one thing it really, you have the upstairs where the folks are going to live, and this, they would have a better grasp and be able to tell you better of what things need to be modified and changed in the design there. But for me, what stood out was they retrofitted an old building with new safety for the firefighters. So like when they, I'm going to use the wrong words, but when they come back from a run, they have to detox what they got on, so that they have the least amount of effect from exposure to the crap that they are exposed to when they fight a fire or go to any emergency. And so for their personal health, for the health of anyone coming along and being exposed to their equipment, and then their families when they go home. So they have done it. They've retrofitted, new technology into old space, but it'd be far better for everyone in that respect if they could design to modern standards that kind of a health, a respect for their health, respect for anyone coming into the building's health and their family's health. So that's one thing in particular that stands out to me. And there was another spot that Dale took us to. I can't quite remember where it was. Somewhere around here where he opened this door and then there was this big old hole in the floor.
Right behind you.
Yeah. And it's like,
It's in this room right behind us.
Yeah.
this is being recorded. I will keep my but it's, if that was in my house or if that was in my place of work, I would be very upset. And I'd be upset at my husband, and I would think about quitting, because that is just, you just look at it, and it's like, there's no rhyme or reason for this. And so my takeaway, in my words, it is a safety issue for the employees. It's really important that you treat the people right. And there's only so much, bubble gum and duct tape that you can do to retrofit an old design, and with all the new stuff that needs to be, since 1991.
Yeah, I mean, the technology, obviously, in that 34 to 35 years has changed. And, a new fire station, will take care of a lot of that safety for them. Percentage of stuff that they gather, on fire. And this was built for a volunteer fire department, and everything that we did upstairs, we retro. And my kids are the majority of it. And we've had multiple issues. I can take you on underneath the building, you wouldn't like it.
Underneath the building is water.
Yes.
There you
That's
go.
that big hole that she's talking about before. So, as taxpayer living here, I know I've been told before, well, you look at it different because you got a firefighter, you get a fire chief. No, I want to have what's best, the best we can get for them, and so we do that.
I appreciate you saying that because, we're elected by our neighbors and we are responsible for spending their money on the services that they need.
Absolutely.
And, we feel a grave obligation to them to provide emergency service as far as spending the money. But then, it's like any project. There's, you start wondering, do we need this? You know what I mean?
Well, Josh,
I'm not saying we don't, I'm just saying, maybe I'm speaking for everybody.
There hasn't been a building built since 2008. We moved in Station 73, August of 2009. So there's not been a building built here for the township, the fire department, and that time. Yeah, I think he's done a pretty good job of managing those dollars to do that. You know, not to do that, but it's time.
I think another thing is that we've had the luxury of having a surplus for a long time. And we're all gonna have to, you know, as we go down this road, be comfortable with being in debt. So, you know, not saying we don't, what's that?
Within reason.
Right, so that's why I think I want to speak for everybody, but as chairman, if we could just be brought along for the ride on everything, so that we're not, there's no question marks in our minds, you know, why we're spending what we're spending going forward.
And to that point, again, if those of you that had been on the board the previous term, should recall, we brought in a financial consultant, who did bring to the board and taken those steps to help build our reserve fund, specifically on his advice, and still hope that we could do worst case scenario about cash flow and about borrow about half, maybe even better. 2 years ago, his comment to me was, if you could wait 2 years, we could probably cash flow the whole thing. That was before we saw construction costs and some of that go way up. But you know, so we've set things up in the past to accommodate and minimize at least that type of effect going forward.
Research.
I think the biggest thing too, when we do exit interviews, we always ask, there's questions or parameters that we ask. How'd you like to hear morale, safety, time on job, so on and so forth. That's civilian-based and merit-based. I will say that we've had a couple that were very upset when they left about the living arrangements at this firehouse. In fact, one individual who's now retired said to me, and I don't want to go too far in depth, but this kind of brings me to the point. If somebody had a problem with their home, they'd want it fixed ASAP. How's come they're not helping them? They're helping us. I said, that's true. So within that scope is pride and ownership is a big thing. And those who live in Decatur Township that serve the fire department, that serve the community, are your neighbors. They're not going to want to come to work. We've had mold, we've had water issues. It's almost like we have to write up exposure forms every time we come in the building. I'm saying that as a fireman, not as a fire chief. I dealt with as a fireman, engineer, a lieutenant, now as a fire chief. And it's very frustrating that if I have something in my home that I need fixed, I have different avenues to go through. We've tapped out some of those avenues, whether it's insurance, whether it's, you know, for instance, I saved the department money last year with a broken radio that was damaged on a fire. We can do that with the building as well. Right. So those are different things that we have to be cost effective of. And the more that we negate pride and ownership without building a building, you're going to lose people. And in turn, it's going to make you look bad. I'm just saying, with all due respect, sir, from a standpoint of constituency, we're going to look bad in the sense that we're not providing for the people that provide for you.
I think I realized that. Brian, I had lunch with those guys a little while back, and he was showing me around the firehouse. And I guess I didn't really understand that you are actually living here. You know, you have your bed and your kitchen.
It's a third of your life, sir.
Right. I mean, and you're here 24 hours shifts, how many days a week? It's like a second home.
Yeah.
So,
And you want everyone to go home every morning.
yeah. Right. And I think we're completely on. I feel like we have a wonderful relationship, right? Like I said, this meeting was just to bring new board members up to speed on, you know, why we're here, because it's a lot of money we have to be asked to spend, and I think that more comfortable we are, and then we have answers to give to people when they see the property tax bill, you know, or they say, why are we in debt right now? Well, because, you know, we were tasked with providing you the best emergency service available, and it's just the way we had to do it. So
Do you guys have any other questions for anybody, or?
Did you guys?
Oh, yeah.
There's a stairs. I mean, they walk up to get supplies, and it's obviously not up to code, and it's doesn't look very safe to me. Not to mention, like you said, the mold.
Right.
There's still mold. People go home sick all the time
Really?
because of the mold. You can look in the ceiling and it's full of mold. The roof leaks all the time. We fix it, it leaks again.
This just happened not too long ago. We had an incident there. But luckily we got that fixed. But to Chief Key's point, I mean, like I said earlier, we can do exposure reports every time you come in here.
Yeah, just, in
You'll
my
get
office,
$300,000.
in my office, the plumbing busted and it all come on my desk.
Yeah.
All kinds of that.
It's still loud in there.
It wasn't the good plumbing.
Yeah, that was a toilet.
What was the building? Blazing. Blazing.
Yeah.
Sid.
I can't remember his first name.
Sid. We had a builder named Sid.
Yeah. A lot of what was here wasn't meant for people to be here 24/7,
Absolutely.
365.
The building wasn't meant for cohabitation.
It was not. We've outgrown it people wise. Like we don't have enough beds. We don't have enough space to add beds. So the people that need to be here can't be here.
Absolutely.
Sleeping in the trustee's office.
We've got people sleeping in offices actually. Yeah. We don't have enough room. In the bunker.
One thing that I do want to do with the chief discuss when the meeting adjourns or recess, we want you to tour. Like I say, I think have it liberated. Said a little bit of seeing it.
Seeing believing.
Absolutely. Right. And well, I got four, but I mean, again, as the township executive, who's the ultimate financial fiscal officer of the township, I mean, it's my duty, and I take it very seriously that the township funds are spent appropriately, not wasted. I've used it as kind of a joke, but kind of serious, right? The scope comes to me with gold toilets, they'll be eliminated, right? Those type of things. So, at the end of the day, we're not going to, I'm going to see to it personally, because it's my obligation to 37,000 people to get a township to not waste their money.
Great. We appreciate that. Do you guys have any further questions? Timeline, I guess, is my kind of last question for the folks from Envoy. So going back to your previous slide with all of that, if we kind of checked everything off, in the coming weeks, and let's say things go normal, right, and the site is good, and weather turns out to be good, and builders are able to get things done in a relatively again, normal, timely fashion. What are we talking about when, turning first dirt and then opening up this thing?
They got a schedule from Normal. So if everything goes well and we start in July, this thing gonna be done 12 to 14 months.
And usually we're in a kind of an interesting position now. If they can get in before the end of the year, they'll want to, right? So they can get started and do all that. So that is the benefit of sooner. I think you guys are also in a somewhat good point in the market. It's been really tough the past couple of years with how busy everything is, but with some of the stuff going on with Senate Bill 1, some of the stuff going on with tariffs, everything else, like there are fewer public projects that are happening. So the fewer that happens, opens up. Guys are wanting to feed their families, so it makes the bidding a little bit more competitive. It's no guarantee, but it's a better time coming into this next 6 to 9 months than it was 6 months ago.
If I may, I would say we appreciate everything you do as a board for us, you guys. We appreciate what the community committee has done. I know Chief Wood and the administrative staff appreciates Chief Key's contributions with our internal committee. We also have an internal committee that before we ever got to the point of Envoy being in the room with us, this committee went and toured everything Envoy has been, over as a development of, for all the projects they've done. We've looked at every firehouse they've built. We've also had this committee go out and see what's out there now, technology that's changed. We did provide them with a list of kind of, it's not just once, but it's based on growth. So we've been in this building so long, we don't want to build something that just barely meets the needs of today. We want to build for the future. And what does that look like for a growing township? But as well being responsible with taxpayer dollars. So we've given them kind of a little bit of a list to go off of that we'll get into it more in depth. But these were things that we felt, were needs for the safety of our firefighters, the efficiency of doing our job going out the door, the efficiency of operations for the trustee side, for the board place, while keeping in mind the ADA compliance issues, things we have to do to meet regulations and standards with OSHA, with NFPA, with fire gear and stuff like that. So there has been a lot that has gone on behind the scenes with internally, with committee wise, to make sure. So we've not just said, hey, we want a new firehouse. There's been countless hours of time put in to, this is why we need it. This is what makes sense for us. Let's think about every avenue of growth. What are we going to do? That's why when we talked about the growing space here, not being able to, she works out of an office. She sleeps in an office. And so that's kind of the reason why when we looked at it, it wasn't just, let's just build and make a list of, oh man, this firehouse has all these neat things we wanted. It's a list of needs, but it's also a list to bring us to compliance with what everybody else is doing. And there's so many things this building that though we've tried to bring it up to standard, it still isn't up to code at all. And I know the trustee has to review those reports that come in, but so, and we're doing everything we can with that, but you can only go so far before you say, we can't put that money into this building. And but we've done a lot of legwork, thanks to these committees to be able to get us to the point of saying, this makes sense to us, and here's how we can be most responsible, but yet get the end result for the public that's going to help us serve them better and their needs instead as the township starts to grow. So. Great.
Good.
Okay. Anything else, trustee?
No, I mean, just again, summarize, appreciate that time, that, certainly the doors open, phone's always open, email's always open. It's been a busy time, working on this hard, like I said. There's some other matters, but I'm not going to get publicly into it, but some safety and some health matters were mentioned with the building and those kinds of things that I think it's also time to look at addressing this building. We're looking at things as well to go in and look at some of our air conditioner and heating stuff has just been installed since I've come in the office. There's no point in disposing of them. We can take them out, store them, we can use them in other facilities. We can need the parts from them. I literally had that conversation today with our heating air conditioning contractor. So, again, at the end of the day, I don't shirk my responsibility. I will say this to brag, but no one's out in the community more than me as far as involvement with civic organizations, social service organizations. I have to answer to all 37,000 people in the township. If I didn't think this was the right thing to do and to tell them to do that is, I'm going to be here and asking you folks to do it. And that's the philosophy and basis upon which I will move forward and ensure that the staff moves forward as well.
That's answering to your question earlier. I answered your question when you asked how long is it going to take timeline for moving dirt. So that's 12-14 as I told you. But I missed the part of it. There's going to be also the months prior when it comes to moving dirt. So you have there 6 months, usually 6 to 8 months on design phase. Because I think I understood moving dirt, so I was straight up answer that one.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Just in closing, I'd like to express again my appreciation to Pat, Dale, Joe, for joining us tonight, all the work they put into things at this point, all the support as well. And certainly also to the staff that has taken the lead on many things, and certainly, like I said, can get it done without that. Thank you all. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
No Pacers. It was yesterday.
Yeah.
This should have wrapped up a lot earlier. So we have announcements. Are there any announcements? Or?
No, again, I did purposely since we're meeting next week. I'll have the full agenda items for financials and things like that to provide to you next week. I got a document or two today that formatted, having some questions, maybe got something to get to me. I'll get to you as soon as I can, certainly before we notice of the meeting next Tuesday.
Right. Any other business? No further business?
Thank you.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll first sit.
Second.
Doors are open.
There you go.